So we will be watching his pre-recorded presentation on designing web content for older users. Mr. Ueki brings over 20 years of experience as a web accessibility consultancy and currently serves as an invited expert for WCAG 3 in W3C Accessibility Guidelines Working Group. This presentation will run for 26 minutes or so, after which we can share some pre-answered questions if the time allows. If you have any question regarding our association or any question to Mr. Ueki, please feel free to share your question through the chat to the host. So now I'm going to play the pre-recording.
Hello everyone. Hello from Tokyo, Japan. My name is Makoto Ueki. Thank you so much for having me here today, but unfortunately I'm not presenting right now. I recorded this presentation earlier this week because tonight I'm gonna host a meetup event in Tokyo, which is called A11Y Tokyo Meetup. So my apologies, I had no choice. But let me share my experiences in terms of designing web content for older users. Again, I'm Makoto Ueki of Infoaxia. I'm a web accessibility consultant in Japan. I've been doing this more than 20 years now. I've been participating in W3C's Accessibility Guideline Working Group, and I was a chair of the working group for the latest version of the Japanese National Standard. I used to be a chairman of Web Accessibility Infrastructure Committee for 7 years, and I was the first Japanese person who got certified from IWAP as the certified professional in web accessibility. Before diving into the details, let me share the background of my presentation. It is about the data on the elderly internet users in Japan. In Japan, we have the Japanese National Standard for Web Content Accessibility. In the introduction section, the scope is defined that this standard is for web content to be usable by all users, including the elderly and people with disabilities, regardless of the devices, web browsers, or assistive technologies they are using. This standard was published in 2004 for the first time. The standard already included the elderly people as one of the user groups we need to take care of when we think about accessibility. As you might notice, Japan is the most rapidly aging country on this planet. At this moment, about 30% of populations are older than 65 years old, and about 15% are over 75 years old. On the other hand, population under 15 years old are decreasing year by year. This is a pyramid-shaped diagram showing the population distribution by age group and shows the distribution at 4 points in time: 1990, 2020, 2025, and 2040. From the bottom up, the population is divided into 4 age groups: up to 19 years old, 20 to 64 years old, 65 to 74 years old, and 75 years old and over. In 1990, the 20 to 64 age group was biggest volume zone, but by 2040, we can see the population will have shifted to the 65 and over and 75 and over age groups. So again, Japan is aging. Population over 65 years old are increasing. On the other hand, the total population is decreasing, which means Japanese market is getting smaller and older year by year. This is very obvious. This graph shows the percentage of the total amount of savings held by Japanese people in each age group. Although this is only a reference data, people aged 60 and over account for 63.5% of the total, and people aged 50 and over account for over 80%. We can say that the older people got more money. In other words, the average amount spent by older customers is higher than younger customers. So you cannot ignore older customers if you are gonna do business in Japan. Let me show you one more data. This is a graph showing the internet usage rate by age group. The usage rate for people in their teenagers to 40s is over 95%, meaning that almost everyone uses the internet. The usage rate for people in their 50s is also over 95%. The usage rate among the elderly is also gradually increasing, with 85% of users in their 60s and around 60% in their 70s. One of the key takeaways from my talk would be that accessibility also benefits the older users. Accessibility is all about users with disabilities at first, but if you make it more accessible, it will become more older users friendly and more users can enjoy better user experiences. Do you know WCAG 2.2? It is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines developed by W3C. The introduction section is saying that these guidelines also make web content more usable by older individuals with changing abilities due to aging and often improve usability for users in general. This is true. This is very true. The W3C has been aware of this point for many years and has published a document called Old Users and Web Accessibility. This document specifically explains the similarities between older users and users with disabilities. The document introduces the overlapping user needs between older users and users with disabilities, especially about vision, physical ability, hearing, and cognitive ability. When you will get older, you will need stronger color contrast and larger links and buttons. Captions for videos will help you enjoy the video content. And you will like more user-friendly design, which will make it easier for you to navigate and interact with the web pages. Here is an interesting set of figures. These are data showing the decline in various physical functions that occurs with age. This data was published in 1985, so it is almost 40 years ago, but it is very interesting. So let me share it with you as reference data. If you set your physical ability in your early 20s as 100, how much do you think it will decline by the time you reach 55 to 59 years old? Vision, hearing, learning, memory, and analyze. What do you think? According to this data, vision is 63, hearing is 44, learning ability is 59, memory is 53, analytical and judgmental abilities are down to 77. This means that my hearing ability is less than half of what it used to be when I was young. That's why my wife has been shouting at me almost every day, "Hey, are you even listening to me?" And now, I think I have an idea why it happens all the time. Um, I'm joking. W3C has published a working group note making content usable for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. As I shared in the previous slide, if you reach 55 years old, your ability to learn, remember, analyze, and judge declines considerably compared to when you were 20 years old. I think we can say that the user needs of older people are similar to the user needs of the people with cognitive or learning disabilities. And there is also something interesting written in this document. According to the results of a study, it was found that when seniors try to do something online, only about half of them are able to complete it. Research suggests that seniors managed to complete only 55.3%, about half, of attempted tasks online. Just 55.3%. If you are a business person, you can't ignore this data. Generally speaking, the term elderly refers to people aged 65 and over. But think about it. Vision, hearing, learning ability, memory, analytical and judgmental ability, and even the ability to operate a mouse pointer or a touch screen do not suddenly start to decline once you reach the age of 65. As you can see from the data I shared, they already have declined significantly around 55 years old. In the title of my presentation today, I am using English. In choosing the title, I choose the word older rather than elderly. And there is actually a big reason for that. In other words, rather than looking at it from the perspective of people over 65, we should be focusing on the fact that as we get older, our various abilities decline, so that 55 years olds are older than 40 years old, and 50 years old are older than 45-year-old, and 55-year-olds are older than 50-year-olds. That is why in the title of this session, I have used the word older rather than elderly. Designing for older users rather than elderly users will become increasingly important in the future. Okay, now let me share how accessible web design works well for older users. I picked up 10 issues that are often found in usability tests with older users. They are text size, color contrast, form control labels, use of color, error messages, headings, target size, video captions, switching between hidden and visible, and button appearance. Interestingly, these issues can be resolved by following web content accessibility guidelines. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time today to go through every single point, so I'm gonna do resize text, color contrast, section headings, target size, and captions for video today. Plus, let me do invisible and visible. This one is not described in the web accessibility guidelines, but this is one of my findings through usability tests with older users. Okay, let's move on. Let's get started with resize text. For example, a user with a visual impairment, such as low vision, might think that the default text size is too small to read. So you should design the page so that users can enlarge web pages using the browser zoom functionality. This is very essential and important also for older users. Most older users need larger text size As you can easily imagine, this is common user needs between older users and users with visual impairments. If you are doing responsive web design and avoid causing horizontal scroll, that would be good enough. Next one is color contrast. The W3C guidelines WCAG 2.2 have a success criterion of a color contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1 or more. For example, when placing text on top of a photo, it becomes difficult to ensure a contrast ratio because the background color of the text can be various colors. In this photo, there is something written in white text, but can you read the text? Now, here's a question. How can we make these white text easier to read? If you were a designer, what would you do? For example, you could add a background color behind the white text. In this example, a transparent gray background is added for the text to increase the contrast ratio and make the white text easier to read. Of course, you use a solid background color instead of a transparent one, the contrast ratio will be even higher and the text will be even easier to read. You can also outline each letters, but you need to be careful as the contrast may not be good enough depending on the font you are using. Alright, next up is section headings. This is at level AAA in the guidelines, but I would say this is essential for all the users. On web pages and app screens, you may see that a section is indicated as being a separate section by having a different background color or being surrounded by a border. This can be surprisingly stressful for users in many cases, even if you can tell from the appearance that something is different. You won't know what it is until you take a look at the content of the section. Now, here's a question. How can we help users to more quickly decide whether a section is necessary for them at the moment? The answer is pretty straightforward. Just place headings at the start of each section. If the wording of the headings clearly expresses the content of each section, users will be able to more easily select and skip information and will be able to reach the content they are looking for more quickly. At the same time, screen reader users will also be able to go through the page by checking the headings on the page. Let's move on to the next one, target size. There are a lot of advertisements on Japanese mobile sites, which is very annoying. How about on Taiwanese mobile sites? This is an example of an advertisement that we actually often come across when viewing web pages on a smartphone. The part framed in red at the bottom of the screen is the advertisement. I want to close this ad. Can you guess how to make it invisible? The answer is that you can close it by tapping the very small cross button in the top left of the ad. However, it's too small and the color contrast is not sufficient, so it's very difficult to find in the first place. This button also has the color contrast issue. And if you look carefully, there is another ad on this screen. It is surrounded by the red frame in the upper right of the previous ad. I'd like to remove this ad too, but do you know how to do that? The answer is you can do it by tapping the small plus button in the bottom right hand corner of the ad. However, this is also small, hard to see, and difficult to find. One more example. The part surrounded by the yellow frame is an advertisement that covers the entire smartphone screen. Can you guess how to close and remove this ad? Can you see the very small cross button in the center of the screen? If you press this, you can close the ad, but I just couldn't press it and was repeatedly taken to the page linked from the ad. This is super frustrating. All the buttons are too small. The guidelines also have a success criterion for button size for users who have difficulty pressing buttons with their hands or fingertips. WCAG 2.2 has a success criterion 2.5.8 target size minimum. For example, to prevent users from accidentally pressing the wrong button or link, each target size must be at least 24 by 24 CSS pixels. However, this is literally a minimum size, and the level AAA success criterion requires a larger size of 44 pixels. Guidelines from Apple and Google also recommend larger sizes, so it is better to make them as large as possible to reduce user stress and prevent accidental operation. The next one is captions for video. Uh, Accessibility guideline requires providing captions so that users can understand the audio of the video, even if they are deaf or hard of hearing. Did you know that captions make it easier for people who can hear to understand the information provided by the videos? This is because if captions are available on the screen, you can read text while you are listening to the audio, which greatly reduces the load on your brain when trying to understand the content. All the users also can more easily enjoy videos if captions are provided. They don't have to concentrate on audio. On news sites run by Japanese TV stations, the biggest factor in increasing the number of views a video gets is whether or not it has captions. Also, it is almost always the case that videos by popular YouTubers in Japan have captions. On Japanese websites, YouTube is very often used for videos. On YouTube, captions are saved as text files, so the words and phrases in the captions can also be searched for, which improves searchability and findability. Recently, voice recognition technology has evolved considerably, so YouTube can now automatically create captions in Japanese with a high degree of accuracy. I'm curious how it works in Taiwanese language. One more thing. This is not from guidelines, but from my findings through usability tests with older users. There is a user interface called an accordion. By default, the content is hidden and the user can make it visible as needed. In other words, it is a user interface that can be expanded and collapsed. There is the advantage that it saves space on the screen. However, older users often don't know or notice that it can be opened and closed in the first place. Also, when it is opened, there is very little hidden content. And sometimes I think that there is no need to hide it using an accordion. There is another example of a similar UI, a pull-down menu using the HTML select element. In Japan, it is sometimes called a select menu, drop-down list, or drop-down menu. Just like an accordion, the options inside are hidden by default, so the user has to open and check the contents themselves. The thing is that I have seen many older users in usability tests who do not try to open this pull-down menu. In other words, older users may think that when they look at the screen, nothing exists there except for what they can see. Now, here's a question. If older users tend not to use pull-down menus, what kind of user interface would you change to? One solution would be to use radio buttons instead of a pull-down menu, especially if there are not many options. Having the radio buttons lined up on the screen will make it easier for older users to find options and select one of them. For accordion, don't hide content by default if possible, or don't use accordion if there is not much content to be hidden. Looks like time is up. This presentation is just the beginning. You will be able to find common user needs between older users and users with different disabilities more and more. I would like to encourage you all to read this document, making content usable for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. Accessibility is about different types of disabilities. Reading this document can be your good starting point because you will find common points with improving usability and providing better user experiences for all users. Uh, yeah, this is it. If you liked my presentation, please invite me to Taiwan next time. I have more stuff I should share with you all. Again, thank you so much for having me tonight. Let's make it more accessible and usable for all the users. Domo arigato.
Okay, how was it? That was a very good session and recording, right? Ueki-san has over 20 years of accessibility experience, including testing all the different type of disability needs and usability tests with the older users. So my name is Bertrand Huang. I'm a board member of APAC AIA. I'm going to read some of the pre-answered question that we asked before this event. So I found some questions. The answer that he replied was very insightful. So I'm going to read a few of them. The first question, what strategy actually work when creating digital experience for elder users beyond just meeting accessibility standards? So Ueki-san replied, he said, I would say go and meet users. The requirement defined in the accessibility standard like WCAG is just a bit minimum. Even if a web page is conforming to WCAG, it doesn't mean the web page is usable and user-friendly. 100% accessible web page can be hard to use due to the level of usability is not enough. Once you made your web page accessible, then do the usability tests with older users because users tell us everything all the time. All right, here's the next question. What common accessibility issues do you encounter when testing the website for your clients, and how do you address them? So Ueki-san replied, since there are a lot of similarities and common points between people with disability and older users, the very common accessibility issue he found, one is lack of alternative text for screen reader users, or not usable by keyboard for the keyboard users to navigate the website. Third is insufficient color contrast. This one is particularly important for older user because their vision degrades, just like people with visual impairment or low vision. The fourth would be lack of inaccurate caption for video. People who are deaf or hard of hearing, just like maybe along with aging, we start losing our hearing capability, just what Wiki-san presented in the slide. The fifth one, most commonly found issue would be image of text. This one is particularly for users with dyslexia, a type of a disability, but surprisingly, there are so many people with dyslexia in the world, including lots and lots of celebrities, like musicians. I remember Avril Lavigne is one of them. So first of all, just start understanding and implementing WCAG or standard, accessibility standard to make them more accessible. It is very essential and very important. Um, sorry. It's very important to establish in-house quality standard for accessibility for all users. The keyword here is shift left, meaning you need to include accessibility tests in the very early stage of your product designing. Try to spend a little smaller amount of money for the testing and design in of the accessible principle. And also try to use, for example, like accessible themes or plugin if you're designing with the WordPress. So these things can save you huge amount of money if you only like when you have to deal with this after your product is released. So try to include this in mind. And if you have the need of trying to make your website or digital product accessible for all users or for older users, have more usability tests. And throughout the development stage, try to include as many tests as possible when your product is, once you have to implement a feature or two. I think I have only 5 minutes. Okay. So I'll just say one last question. This question, beyond user interviews, I was asking him, would Wiki-san he recommend using any digital tools or devices that may help developers and designers better envision and understand older users' needs during the early stage of the design phase when user interviews may not be available? So what Wiki-san just said, for older users, he doesn't really have a specific recommendation for tools or device. However, he would emphasize that top priority for older users are color contrast and text resizing, the zoom capability on the browsers. These aspects can be verified using testing tools and built-in browser functionalities. Also, like the operating system like Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, they all have their own accessibility features and functions. There's these links we can provide it after the events if you need. So while these features are primarily designed for users with disabilities, they can help you understand how different users interact with your web page or apps in various ways. And there's one valuable tip that he offered. So ask around your older family members, your parents, your uncles, your aunties, and your grandparents. Try to ask them to use your website or apps. Simply just observe how they navigate and interact with it. Just watch them without offering any advice. The insights you gain from watching their natural interaction with your interface can be invaluable. So these would be the questions that I got from Wiki-san. And we'll also summarize and post it on our social media, which we'll share it shortly. I mean, the social media links, we can share it after the event or in the chat. I would just like to add, I have very deep, I feel the same way as Wiki-san said, because currently myself, I'm attending a Nobility Air event, which is based in Austin. It's a hackathon like designing accessible website for the MPOs or musicians or artists. My team member, one of my team member, he's an accessibility tester, and he offered elder design testing, usability test. And what basically he offered is like this. I think my time is up.
Okay.
I think my time is up, so I'm giving this will be the summary and the session of the Mr. Ueki-san. So I'm handing my time back to the host. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertrand. We are really appreciated that Ueki-san did this pre-recorded video to our event, as we know that he is having a very important monthly event which called Alley Tokyo. It's an accessibility community meetup in Tokyo, and they host it monthly. So if any of you have a chance to visit Tokyo, maybe you will be interested in joining this event.